And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Basketball Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about the biggest question for each and every single ranked team in the NCAA right now. And just, the biggest questions for each and every single one of these teams. And I'm just going to go over all of this. Again, let me know in the comments what you guys think, and let me know if you guys have anything to say, if you guys have any expectations for this college team. If you guys actually would want more college content on this podcast, go ahead and let me know in the comments as well. And instead of starting with number one, because, I usually start with number one and I go down on the list, I actually want to start with my home team, like the team that plays in my home state, New Jersey, the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. So last year, Rutgers was ranked 25th. I know it's really last, it's dead last in top 25, but it doesn't matter because they're top 25, and you have to win games in order to rank higher. So I have a feeling that they could really, I hope they could do that for this season. But yeah, if I was for NCAA, now aside from my own college, assuming my college actually makes it to the NCAA tournament, I'm going to be rooting for the Scarlet Knights big time, especially when they go up against a bunch of Big Ten opponents in their division. Now, the biggest question for Rutgers in this season is Ace Bailey and Dylan Harper. Are they ready to carry the mantle for Rutgers? That is the ultimate question. This is going to be the most anticipated season in Rutgers men's basketball history. They're bringing in Harper and Bailey. They're two of the top three picks in ESPN's most recent 2025 NBA mock draft. And Steve Pickle is going to rely on both of them heavily in the first game of the season. He's surrounded them with veteran transfers, but Rutgers' success this season is going to be determined by how quickly those two freshmen can actually produce. And yes, they are true freshmen, so there is a lot of pressure on them going into this, but that is going to be the question for the Rutgers Scarlet Knights. So, aside from Rutgers, let's continue on with this list and start right back all the way to the top at number one. And now, if we do run out of time for this segment, I'll continue this segment in the next podcast, because I do have another segment lined up that I actually do want to cover. Or maybe if I do have more time in that next segment, I'll continue on with my list of the biggest questions for each college team, if you guys are interested. So first, we're going to go right ahead and talk about Kansas. They were ranked number one last year. And the biggest question for Kansas, the Jayhawks, is can Bill Self really, can he find that perimeter combination on the roster? Riley Kugel, he decommitted, and the backcourt rotation has sort of opened up for Kansas Jayhawks in this season. And they also were able to add A.J. Storr, who's an elite transfer, Rylan Griffin, a really good shooter, and Zeke Mayo, and a veteran high major starter, Shaquille Moore, to add along with the returning starter, Dejon Harris Jr. So we're just going to see how the starting lineup fares with that. But that's really their biggest question, if they could find the right perimeter combination for this season. Next, the Alabama Crimson Tide. And I really would never have expected Alabama to be ranked in both basketball and in football, so high in both of the NCAA rankings, which is insane. So Alabama's ranked second. They were previously ranked second. So the big question is Alabama going to be as effective offensively despite having a much bigger lineup now? And by bigger, I mean in terms of height. So late in the season, Grant Nelson and Duran Stevenson, they're two big men that they acquired, but they can also stretch the floor. And this season, Rutgers transfer Clifford Omori, forgive me if I botched that name, is going to anchor in the post. So the big question is, one of the things that Alabama was really good at last year was their offense and their pacing. So having a super big lineup is going to slow down your pacing. So that's really going to be the big question. Is Alabama still going to be as high-powered on the offensive side of the ball as they were last year? So next team is the Yukon Huskies. They were ranked third. They ended up winning the NCAA tournament. They became the first team to win back-to-back in a very long time. So the big question for this, aside from, can they win it again, is can Hassan Daira make the step up to the starting lineup? So in addition to the NBA talent that the Huskies have produced in the past couple of years, Dan Hurley has also had one of the best bench guards in the country in Daira. So last season's Big East Six Man of the Year award, he won the Six Man of the Year award, and now the question is, can he move into that starting lineup? And he averaged 6 points per game last season as a six-man, so imagine how much he could average as the number one option. Well, not really the number one option, but as a starter for the team. Next team that was ranked fourth was the Houston Cougars. Now, the big question for Houston is, can Kelvin Sampson replace Jamal Sheed for this season? And the reason why I say this is because Sheed turned into one of the nation's best perimeter point guards, and during his time with the Cougars, he was able to combine his elite defensive ability with his really good playmaking, and his playmaking came up clutch in a couple of their games. So that's really going to be the biggest question that the Houston Cougars have for the season. Next, the Gonzaga Bulldogs. They were ranked fifth last year. So will Gonzaga be the better defensive team without its best defender? That's really going to be the big question. So Gonzaga's second half turnaround last season was very, very impressive, but the Zags will most likely need to be a little bit more consistent at stopping and protecting the ball at the rim. And one big addition to their team is transfer Emmanuel Anosenti. Forgive me if I botched that name. And he's an elite defender who could probably help on that end of the floor, but questions still remain to be seen. And also, it should be noted that this is sort of pulled from an ESPN article for those of you guys who are curious where I'm getting all of these questions from and where I'm getting the rankings and the rosters and all of this stuff. But I do agree with these questions. I do think they're valid, especially the one with UConn and the Huskies, because winning an NCAA championship isn't really as guaranteed as winning an NBA championship. Like going back to back, it's not really as common. So I don't really think the big question should be on whether or not they go back to back. Like the success of the UConn Huskies program isn't dependent on whether or not they go back to back. So that's not really like, the way I see it, that's not really like, the big question for a team, if whether or not they can go back to back, because it would be rather unfair. Like NCAA teams in basketball, it's very difficult to go back to back. So I don't really hold that to any sort of college team standards. Now, professionals, that's a different story. So next, and honestly, maybe the last team on the list before I go into the next segment, because we are running out of time, is the Baylor Bears. They were ranked sixth in They were ranked sixth in the nation last year. So the question for them is there enough? Is their roster finally enough to actually win? So Baylor is as loaded as any team in the country on the perimeter. And they were able to get Duke transfer Jeremy Roach, an elite recruit, VJ Edgecombe, forgive me if I botched their names, and also Jaden Nunn is returning, Langston Love is also returning. They have this Miami transfer, Nochad Omeyer, forgive me if I botched that last name. They should anchor the team down low, but Scott Drew doesn't really have a ton behind him besides Josh Ojinawa. Forgive me if I completely botched that name. And they might have to focus on playing small ball, which is a little bit risky going into college because it's not the same game as the NBA. You can't really go into college and go into a small ball lineup like how you would in the NBA and expect it to work 100% of the time. So aside from that, I might continue on with this segment in the fourth segment if we do have some more time, and I might make a follow-up segment with this as well. So if you guys are still interested in what's there to be said about each and every single one of the college basketball ranked teams, then go ahead and tune in and let me know. But aside from that, we are out of time for this third break. So now we are out of time for this third segment, excuse me. So now I'll go ahead and go into a third break and into the fourth segment where I talk about some NBA rumors. The biggest NBA rumor now is that the Lakers offered C.D. Osman an invite to camp. And I'm just going to talk about, the rumors surrounding that because it's a doozy. Let's just say that. So I'll be right back after this short break.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.